If you've ever labeled your child as explosive, strong-willed, sensitive, or angry, we have created a course that is here to support you. Our brand new anger course is now available for purchase. It's available right now. You're going to get 35 video lessons between 1 and 4 minutes long that are practical, insightful, useful, and based off of what real parents were asking us for when it comes to angry kids. It's available right now. It's brand new. We cannot wait to support you with this course. Head to the link in the show notes to grab it.
Welcome to Robot Unicorn, hosted by my parents, Jess and Scott. I hope you enjoyed the episode.
Dr. Tracy, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. I know we've been talking about having you on forever. Welcome to Robot Unicorn.
Thank you, Jess. I'm so grateful to be here with you.
Dr. Tracy and I have been friends for several years now, and I've been talking to you about having you on since before the show even aired. So this is so exciting. Before we get started, I'm wondering if you can just introduce yourself for anyone who doesn't already know who you are.
I'm Dr. Tracy Dalgleish. I'm a psychologist, couples therapist. I'm an author. I'm also a mom to 2 young children and the owner of Integrated Wellness, which is a mental health clinic here in Ottawa. And I always like to share how this work started, which is really about wanting to translate what I do in my therapy room to people all over the world. And it started with being dissatisfied with how we were talking about building healthy relationships. And I was in the depths of my own postpartum experience with my second. And it was at that time that I started my Instagram space and started the podcast and writing about relationships.
Yeah, and I feel like there's so many parallels to what both of us do. We both have a passion for the work that we do that's based not only on our clinical experience, but our experience as parents and humans who've lived this work out. And everything that you teach just always resonates with me so much. And knowing you personally and knowing where your heart is, just everything. So I'm just so excited to have you on and share your knowledge. I always turn to you if I ever have questions about anything couples related to. And that's what I'm really excited to talk to you about today. Before we get into the couples piece, because this episode will be aired a week after Mother's Day. And you talked about the difficult experience you had with your second child postpartum. And before we get into all the couples pieces, that really a lot of the stuff about couples we'll talk about is postpartum, is after having babies and the challenges that can come up. I wonder if you could share a little bit about that difficult postpartum experience that you had.
Mm-hmm. After my first, and hindsight always teaches me more than what it is in the moment. But I remember after having my first, I fell into this shame spiral, this sense of low mood, the sense of anxiety. And looking back, it was more severe than anyone would have known at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't go down the stairs holding my baby for probably 6 months out of fear, this intrusive thought that I would drop my son. I didn't leave the house much more than a walk around the block for 3 months. It took a long time to feel comfortable nursing. And it really threw me upside down just as my entry into motherhood, first having a surprise breech baby, which is part of my story. It was 9 centimeters, water broke, and surprise, there's a bum. It was missed by midwives checking me. And so right from the beginning, it was this moment of having a planned, unmedicated birth, right then to lights being turned on, OB coming in, signing consent. And my husband tells the story of this was your first brave entry into motherhood, of making that decision to keep your son safe by having a cesarean. And for me, what I don't talk a lot about was my struggle into feeling like a failure. Somehow my body failed me. I should have known. Just a lot of shame attached to that. So then fast forward to my second. Before having my second, I would stand at the park with other parents and wonder, why is no one talking about the mental load? I'm doing all these things. And I'm carrying this list of what foods we're eating and when it's nap time. And no one is having these conversations at the park. And so then having my second, again, I'm standing at the park and other parents are talking about nap schedules and feeding choices. And I'm wondering, is anyone else sitting here resenting their partners? Is this just me? And I know as a couples therapist, it's not just me. I know people struggle, but it was really interesting to observe how people are more open to talk about the mental health struggles they're having after having a child. More open, not always. And then also open to talking about the postpartum experience. But rarely were people talking about the struggles they were having in their relationship. And I found myself on many occasions crying in the shower saying, I didn't sign up for this. And how are we so lost? And why do we feel like roommates and just two ships passing in the night? And how in some ways that was attached to a lot of shame initially, because of course I put on my couples therapist hat, I go to the office and I'm working with a couple and I'm supporting them through the same transition. And yet I come home and I'm filled with this resentment and rage towards my husband, and together us struggling to get through that.
Yeah, I think what you're sharing, it sounds so familiar, not only to me, but to so many of the clients I work with, and even some of the moms in my life right now who are having babies for the first time. I feel like I've been having a lot of these conversations, even in my personal life. People coming to me and saying, Jess, when you and Scott had little babies, do you remember feeling resentment? And some people telling me, I am surprised. I'm not angry at my baby, but I'm very angry at my husband. And I was not expecting to be angry at my husband. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what did that look like for you, that resentment, like that anger that you had towards your husband?
Yeah, from a clinical perspective first, resentment is a secondary emotion. It's complex. It's filled with all kinds of other pieces to it. But the reason I call it a secondary emotion is because it's the tip of an iceberg where we know that the mass of the iceberg just contains so much more underneath it. And I like to remind or to inform people or teach people that when we're looking at resentment, what's underneath it? So for myself, that resentment was irritability. It was an overwhelmed nervous system. It was music playing at the same time as the dog barking, at the same time as a child crying.
I feel that. Yeah.
And then looking over at my husband and he's on his phone typing. And that would just send me into this heat in my body. It was almost like from my toes to my fingertips. And then just not having the tools of what to do in that moment. And so then this is where we see couples getting stuck. It spirals into that negative cycle, which is really at the core of where couples get stuck. So then I would say something short. I would be prickly. You know, I often describe my anger and resentment as like a prickle. And then Greg would get defensive. And he'd be like, well, I'm trying my best. And then that would just enrage me even more. And with all of that spiral, in a way, it then just led us to be more disconnected. And it led us to then only talk about, you know, hey, do you got the diaper bag? I've got the water bottles. Or where are the splash pants? Who's doing drop off? And so there really wasn't any connection. I'm putting my hands intentionally, like my fingers intertwining, because that's the connection that we look for with our partner. But then instead it feels more like two ships passing in the night, that we're not feeling close.
Yeah. And how common would you say that experience is in new parents?
So common, more common than we're talking about. And that was really the inspiration behind my first book, was to say, look at how many people are saying, I didn't sign up for this, whether they are new parents, a blended family, having their second or third child. We know from research from the Gottmans that 69% of couples will experience a significant decline in their relationship satisfaction after having a child. And that satisfaction starts to alleviate around 3 years postpartum after having a child. And I remember at one point reading a stat where relationships really start to change and improve after your youngest child reaches 7 years old.
And would you find, because I know your youngest child is the same age as mine, would you find that that's true in your own personal experience?
In my own personal experience, yes, absolutely. And the question around that is, it will depend for people, because at this point now, am I looking to my partner with curiosity and a genuine wish to connect? Or do I have 10 years of backlogged resentment that I haven't addressed?
Absolutely. everything you're saying just rings so true for me personally as well. We've talked a little bit on the show about this, but I think our marriage struggled the most after our third daughter was born. And it struggled the most because the pressures of all the other things we had in our life were just so high at the time. And we were just starting our business. Like Scott had just quit his job to work for Nurtured First. We're trying to figure out how to be business owners together, which felt very difficult given that we have two very different personalities and ways of dealing with things. And then we had 3 kids. We were outnumbered. We had a highly, highly sensitive toddler who just had explosive meltdowns almost all the time. And we were just trying to learn about her sensitivity and how to help her. It just felt so overwhelming. And I actually remember, I think I've told you this before, but one night I'm nursing my daughter, my baby, and it's probably like 11:30 at night. I'm not going to bed. I know Scott's sleeping. And I just feel so resentful towards him. I'm just like, if I go back to the room, I feel like I'm just going to shake him awake and be like, oh, why do you always get to sleep? And I always have to be up with the kids. You know, I'm so frustrated with him. And then I remember a post of yours. Like I was scrolling Instagram and you had some post and I can't remember exactly what it said, but something about, you know, when you're feeling resentful, trying to remember the things that you like about your partner or something along those lines. And I remember being like, oh, shoot, I do like him, but I'm just forgetting. I'm forgetting the reasons why I like him, like even just something as basic as that. And it stopped me from actually leaving the room and just getting really angry at him. But I know for me, that feeling of resentment, and that was after our third. I didn't have it as bad after the first 2. It took me by surprise because that's not who I am. I'm not a resentful person. And I like my husband, but I kind of forgot that I liked him for a time. And so I think it's really important to validate. And I've heard from so many moms in my personal life, my professional life, that feel the same and they feel like they're the only ones who don't feel those feelings of like or even love to their partners anymore.
Yeah. Jess, I'm so glad that we're talking about this because it really this was back in 2018. So my daughter being 1 at the time, nobody was using the word resentment.
Mm-mm.
And yet when I started talking about it online, so many people said, wow, yes, this is exactly what I'm experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
And this piece here, and I mean, recognizing thousands of people signed up for my resentment webinar and knowing the context as well, that we were all in lockdowns at home with the kids and all of the things back in early 2020. But the piece here that I think is so important for us to recognize is that resentment, like and you know this with the work that you do with kids, but all emotions are signals to us. And the question isn't about whether this is a good or bad emotion, but instead, what is this signaling to me? And resentment tells us that there is a need that isn't being met. And we want to go underneath that. What is underneath this resentment for me? Is it envy? Is it that my partner is doing the thing, Scott or Greg, they're laying in bed while we're in nursing or doing the thing? And is it that they're doing something that I wish I could do? Is it anxiety? Is it fear? Is it sadness? Is it loss and grief? What's underneath that? And then asking ourselves, what is it that I need? And oftentimes resentment is the result because we're not letting our partners know what we need, or we are communicating it to them and they're not hearing us or they're not able to meet that need.
I had this conversation recently and I thought it would be good to bring up kind of along this discussion of resentment of this person. They had just had a baby. They're feeling very resentful towards their husband. And they're finding that for the first time in their life, they're yelling. So there's this postpartum rage that's coming out, and the postpartum rage is only coming out towards their husband. And they're like, I don't know how to control it. I hate this feeling that I'm yelling at him all the time. And I don't want to be fighting in this way. That's not who I am. So to someone who's there right now, listening to this conversation, what do you say to that person about like a first next step or a way to kind of support them through that?
I would really want us to look at your nervous system. What's happening in terms of that anger? So we go into our bodies. The anger and rage is coming from a place of fight or flight. And we do that because something doesn't feel good for us. Our nervous system is receiving too much information. And we put it on our partners for really good reasons. One, they're a secure person. They're a trusted person. So we put it there. We also do more of the mutual expression of that, meaning that I'm not going to rage down on my children because we don't put our feelings on our children, but instead our safe person is our partner. So of course it goes to them in some ways. But then the next question is, what isn't being met in my life? Is it that I'm not asking for that 10 minutes before bedtime so I can go for the walk, I can take a bath, I can just sit in quiet with no stimulation, that I can put my feet up against the wall so I can calm my body. Like, what is it in there? Because the rage comes from within ourselves, and we can use tools to monitor or to cope with that emotion. But then we also need to ask ourselves, okay, what is it that needs to be communicated? And how can you do it in a way so your partner understands? Because when we rage at them, it's pushing them further away from you. And it's important for us to remember that the dynamic in there is that when I yell at you, you don't actually hear what's happening for me. So first, let's calm our bodies. Go and do something that feels good for you. Good meaning nurturing, soothing, calming. And then asking yourself, what's really going on here for me? And how can I communicate that to my partner in a way that's going to help them understand? And it might be something like, in the past week, I noticed I've been yelling. So taking ownership for where we've been at. And then saying, I've noticed that I'm feeling overwhelmed. And we're both in this. We're both overwhelmed and we're both sleep deprived. And I need this, whatever that looks like. I need 10 minutes before bedtime. I need you to take on this task so it's no longer this big, heavy backpack that I'm wearing all day long.
Yeah, I feel like that's such great advice. And it's so simple as a first step. I'll give an example for someone, if they're there, of how this helped me and how another way that you helped me. I feel you had a post one time, something about showering. Showering was where a lot of my resentment lied and I come at it as someone who has historically struggled with people pleasing, right? So then you become a mom. And for me, when I became a mom of 3 and a business owner, there was absolutely no way I could keep everybody happy anymore. When I was a mom of 2, I could kind of do it, not well, but I could kind of keep my husband happy. I could make sure all of his needs were being met. I could take care of my kids. I could do that. But the more people were added to my life, the more responsibility was adding to my life, I felt like I was letting people down in every aspect of my life. And the people pleaser part was like, I got to keep trying. I got to keep doing more. I got to help my husband. I got to make sure he has time for his bike rides and his activities that he needs to feel good. And in doing that, I had nothing that I was ever doing for myself. Like there would be weeks when I'd be like, I can't think of a single thing I've done for myself. And I haven't showered in 4 days. And so the showering was the first piece for me that I think it was you. There was some post about, just let them know you're going to take a shower instead of asking for permission. And it was a simple shift for me, but I would feel resentful when I felt like I had to ask for permission to take care of my basic needs. And then I just wouldn't do it because I was like, I don't want to have to ask to take a shower. So I just started saying something like, Scott, I need you to watch the baby. I'm going to go take a shower. And I would go take a shower. And in the shower, I would really just try and regulate myself. I'd shave my legs. I'd take time to actually get that really basic need met. And I started finding that doing simple things like that for myself, or Scott, why don't you hold the baby tonight so I can eat my dinner? Something. And instead of asking, just saying, this is what I need from you, helped me a lot. So I'm curious, your take on that and how you would suggest to, and we're talking a lot about women, but any partner that's feeling resentful to ask for their needs or tell their partner what their needs are.
Yeah. And we'll also just pause here to say 10% of fathers experience postpartum depression, and it's often missed. And so if you notice that your partner or you listening as a dad, you're experiencing increased anger and frustration, depression in men tend to come out as more of that increased irritability and frustration. So let's flag that as well, that all people do struggle to talk about their needs. But it's funny, Jess, because Greg then started to call me after having my second, because of course I learned a lot of this with my first. And he then would call me the shower ninja because he'd say, I didn't know where you went. I said, I saw a moment you were with the kids, so I slipped into the shower and I started to become more assertive. And I can walk that similar path with you in the sense of putting everybody else's needs first and forgetting me. And that was this huge identity shift as well through motherhood of who am I? What do I want? And I think the hard piece is that I would sometimes sit and wait. And we do this. I know moms do this because we're so busy putting everybody else first. But I would sometimes sit and wait for Greg to notice that I needed something. to notice that it's been a week since I've gone out alone, or to notice my increased irritability, and for him to say, why don't, I'll take the kids to the park. Why don't you go do X, Y, or Z? And it wasn't until I really started to label what it is that I needed that that resentment started to lift a little bit. Which is why in couples work, what I say to my couples is, I know you're here because you're looking at the other person right now and thinking all the things that they need to do differently. What we're going to do in our sessions is I'm going to ask you to go inside yourself. And that's really where the change starts to happen. And that can feel really uncomfortable because it's like, well, no, if, and I'll think of the times with Greg, if he just saw that we were out of diapers and went and got them instead of me having to carry that on my list, or if he would just take the kids to the park, it was so easy to look outwards. But the real work was looking inwards. And so, finding those small ways. And I always remind people, when it comes to boundaries and sharing needs, find the person who you can practice that with. Is it with that trusted friend? When they say, hey, let's meet at 2 and you actually want to meet at 10, can you say, would 10 work better? That's a practice point of you sharing a need, and then doing it at home as well, and repeatedly doing it, and remembering that even if you ask the first time and it doesn't go so well, ask again. That's what relationships are about, is continuing to try something so that it works for you, so that it works for both of you. I remind couples that we're co-creating.
Yeah. And I love how you talk about that interdependence, right? Versus dependence. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about that co-creating a relationship and the interdependence.
Yeah, absolutely. So I find we tend to kind of fall into one or the other. A lot of people with today's pop psychology terms is people will come into my therapy room saying, I'm worried I'm codependent, right? There's this fear of this emotional fusion. And so we can tend to sit in one of two positions. So I'm going to use my hands to demonstrate this. So one hand is on top of the other hand. So this is what codependency looks like. And it's a fusion. We lose ourselves in the other person. And it can be slow and insidious. And sometimes they're patterns that we're repeating from early childhood relationships. And it sounds like, oh, you want pizza tonight? Oh, okay. Sure. Pizza sounds great. Even though deep down inside, you wanted tacos. Or your partner says, I absolutely love this cookie. And you're thinking, gosh, my stomach is hurting as I'm eating this cookie. So it's these small ways where we lose our ability to honor our own thoughts, opinions, desires, wishes, and needs. Versus what's happening today, and I'm seeing this more with couples, is that people are swinging into hyper independence. So that sounds like, well, those are your feelings. You go deal with them. And that really loses the interconnectedness that we want in our relationships. So again, using my hands, I'm putting my finger and my thumb together. This like two separate circles. We're far apart. We're not coming together. Those are your feelings. You go do that separately. This is for you to deal with, rather than seeing the goal of a relationship is to balance both autonomy. That's our independence. That's this idea that I have my own wants, needs, and wishes. We're balancing that then with interconnectedness, with intimacy. And so if I take my hands, I'm now interlooping them like a chain. And I do this intentionally because we don't lose our own thoughts and wishes. We instead then say, I am me and you are you, and we are both okay. And another analogy that can go with this is thinking of a sandbox. When you are a child, you're in the sandbox, you're playing with cars. And your partner comes over. So, well, you're not a child. You're an adult playing in a sandbox. You're an adult in the sandbox and your partner comes over and you say, oh, no. You can only play with cars in my sandbox. You want shovel. You want to build castles with your shovel and your bucket. You cannot build castles here. We're only doing cars. That's not a relationship. A relationship, an interdependent relationship says, okay, let's find a way that we can co-create this sandbox. Here, let's make a road around here where my cars can go. And then you can build castles and use your shovel and bucket over here. That's a both space for both of us.
Yeah. And I think that's so beautiful. And I think when we can get there, so, not to keep going back to our story, but I think it's resonant for a lot of people. For a long time, I think I allowed myself to be that kind of quieter version of myself in our marriage. I think that's the people pleasing, I'll do whatever it takes to keep you happy, to let you have time for your hobbies, to let you have time for your interests. But I'm going to silently be building resentment because I'm never sharing, what toys I want to play with in the sandbox. right? And you're so right in the terms of you have to do the deeper work in yourself. For me, I had to do the deeper work in myself to even understand what toys I wanted to bring to the sandbox, what I actually wanted. For me, as someone who struggled historically with people pleasing, that was so deep within me that I had even lost the idea of what it is that I needed and what it is that I wanted. And so I had to go through my own personal journey of really understanding myself so that I could bring my understanding of myself into my relationship and feel confident to say things to Scott, like, you know what, hey, I'm going to go take a shower and you're going to be with the kids. Or I actually get very overstimulated at night. I know you like all the lights on in the house. That's kind of your own baggage from growing up in a very dark house. By the time it's 8:00 p.m., my sensory system is shot. I need to have only lamps on. It's very simple things like that, but I had to learn about myself in order to learn about how to communicate my own needs.
And I want to add to that because then there's this next internal level which says, and after I express what I want to need, can I tolerate the discomfort of possibly upsetting my partner?
Yes.
Because, and that's one of the biggest things that we talk about in my community is what do we do when my partner comes in a bad mood? How do I deal with that? And that codependency is really this internalization, personalization of our partner's mood. Instead of being able to say, something's going on for my partner. They're having an experience. And if they're upset that I said, hey, can you take the kids to the park? I need this morning of quiet time because I'm overstimulated. I'm angry and raging. It's not feeling good. Can I tolerate that my partner is, okay, well, I don't really want to, but okay. I can validate that in my partner and say, I know this isn't exactly what you wanted on a Saturday morning, and this is what I need right now. Let's make sure that what you need later is something we can talk about. And inside myself, I'm doing all of this regulation around my partner's allowed to be upset. It's not my job to make my partner happy all of the time. My needs are important. And this is the underpinning. We have a secure bond that we can come back to and talk about this, where maybe he comes back and says, hey, this morning was really hard because we didn't plan for that. Next time, could we plan for it? And I don't take that personally. And I can say, yeah, you're right. It was out of the blue. And I can tell that that was hard for you. I'm so thankful you did it. And let's plan for how we can both create this time for ourselves.
It's such a dance, right? So in the healthiest way, we need both partners to be able to do this work together, right? And so I'm so grateful that I had Scott as a partner. And actually, I found that it strengthened our marriage so much because I think a lot of the conflict we used to have would be about me not saying what I need and him saying, well, I would love to actually hear your opinion on this. Don't just agree with me or don't just say this because I'm saying this, what do you actually feel? And so I felt when I actually started to say, look, this is what I need from you, or this is why I feel this way, or this is how my sensory system works, that was very healthy for our relationship and something he had been craving from me for a long time. It's just, I couldn't get there. Friends, we have exciting news. The Anger course is now available. This course was created for parents of kids who would be labeled as angry, strong-willed, sensitive, or explosive. It's meant for kids ages 3 to 9 years old. Inside the course, you're going to find 35 video lessons, all between 1 and 4 minutes long, really easy to digest, covering everything from your triggers, how you view anger, of course, your childhood experiences, to what anger is and why it presents the way it does, and how even sensitivity plays into it. And then you'll finish it off with some scenarios and really practical tools. The whole thing's only an hour and a half long because we know you're busy. We can't wait to support you. Head to the link in the show notes to grab the Anger course right now. But I also know that for many people, there's a mismatch. There's one person in the relationship doing the work and the other person who is unable to do it. So for those people, how do you support them and how do you help them?
Yeah, I always remind people that if you are ready and willing to do the work, keep going because you are going to be impacting your children as well. And when one person changes in a dynamic, there's the potential for the whole system to change. And you and I know that from a systemic perspective of how we work with families, how we work with couples, is to remember that you can do this work. It's not going to mean your partner is going to change over time immediately, but they will get there. They could get there. And so, for example, that cycle that Greg and I would get stuck in, I would get angry and sharp. He would get defensive. I would up the ante and he would shut down. And this is a very familiar cycle for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
If I continue to go angry, we're going to guarantee he'll get defensive. But when I started to shift out of my own anger and into what I actually needed and what was happening for me, it gave him a chance to hear something different. And initially it was confusing. Initially he would get defensive again,
Mm-hmm.
and I would slow it down and say, what just happened there? What did you hear me say? And it was, and I know a lot of people say, okay, Dr. Tracy, you're the couples therapist. You can
Yes.
do this, but we can do it with our partners as well. We can show up differently. So then instead of the anger, which sounds like you never help, I'm always cleaning up after the kids. I did bedtime. I did bath time. You're always on your phone. Instead, if I slow it down and say, okay, what's this about for me? Interesting. I'm feeling like I don't matter. I feel like I'm not seen. I'm carrying all of this. So I go to Greg and I say, just recently, I feel like I'm taking on a lot of things and I'm feeling unseen in all of this. And I think right now what I'm needing is for you to recognize what I'm doing. I know it's not possible for us to shift the load at this time. This is what I'm thinking of when I was off on leave for that year. But, can you see what I'm doing? And when he would then respond with defensiveness in our old pattern, he'd go into so you're saying I'm not enough? You're saying I'm not doing enough? I would have to slow it down and say, if we're talking about your enoughness, I want to hear that. But first, can we stay in this spot right here where I'm saying, do you see all that I'm doing?
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I can relate to that too. I think so a few weeks ago, one of my kids had a birthday party. And for the birthday party, I planned the party. We went horseback riding. I took the kids horseback riding. I got everything we needed for the party, planned out the cake, the decorations, all of those things. Then the next day we had family over. I planned the whole family party. And I start to notice this familiar feeling, of resentment building up. Now, did I ask Scott for help with any of those things? No, I took them all on myself. So that's the first thing.
But my question is, do you enjoy doing some of these things? Or
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
yes.
a lot of moms that I work with will say, I don't want you to take on this task because I actually really enjoy doing it. I'll keep going.
Yes, no, totally. Yeah, I was going to say that too. Like, I didn't ask him for help because I wanted to do it. As a working mom who's often away from my kids for work, like birthday parties or special things like that, that's usually my thing. I want to take it on. I want to show them that that's like my thing to do with you. And after a weekend of doing it all, I felt like I was cleaning up our family party and everyone had left and Scott was on the couch just playing with the kids and I'm cleaning up the stuff from the party. I start to notice that old feeling come up, right? And this is where you can see growth. And instead of just getting angry or rage cleaning, that used to be my signal to Scott that I was angry at him. Classic. I actually just said, hey, look, I'm starting to notice a feeling for myself that I'm feeling a little bit unseen for the amount of effort and time and work I put into this weekend to make this magical for our daughter. And I'm noticing that I'm cleaning up the kitchen by myself and you're having this special time that I would love to also have with the girls.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, do you think you could just help me? Let's clean this up together. And then from there, let's just have a nice evening. And it was just so simple. And he said, yeah, you're right. You know what? Thank you. I didn't notice. I didn't say thank you, but I have noticed of how much effort you put in. We had a hug and then we just moved forward with our evening. And it just showed me that's so much progress. That's what you're saying. Instead of defensiveness, we can have this conversation.
Do you mind if I break down what you did in there? Yeah. And so let's slow this down. So the first thing is you had to be self-aware. So you're bringing awareness into the moment. And that often is pausing and taking a beat and saying, what's actually happening for me here? And then there's a reflection piece in here. And I think the reflection piece is often about, can I go inside myself and say, what's being stirred up? Not personalizing what my partner is doing. So we're depersonalizing what's happening. Him sitting with the kids, it's not about you. It's not that he thinks you should clean up solo. Those are the stories we tell ourselves, right? It's
Yes.
not that you always have to be the one to clean. None of that. So understanding what's happening there and then being able to communicate. And you did. And the communication piece is not and the Gottmans do such a great job, all their research around the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, right? You're not criticizing. You're not saying, you're always with the kids and never helping me. I guess I'll just clean up again by myself. That's an attack on their character. You're not getting defensive. You're not being contemptuous, which is like, of course I'll clean up, Scott. You just enjoy your warm coffee over there, right? And then you're not stonewalling. And that stonewalling can really be felt in a family where you shut down and he kind of notices it. He's like, hey, Jess, you good? And you're like, nothing's wrong. Don't worry about it. That's just that shutdown. And instead, then you're saying to him, here's my experience. Here's what I need. And all because you were able to slow down and notice what that trigger point is. And I use trigger as a loose word here. It's something happening inside of you. And so when everything is spiraling and so fast paced for us moms or parents in general, it is that, what's the cue? Is it that I'm clenching my jaw? For me, it was always the heat through my body. Is it that my shoulders are up? Or is it like this like short breath or my spinning thoughts? That might be your cue. And the cue then is slow down. Just take a beat. What's happening here?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think that will be so helpful for parents, like just those steps, right? And to know too, it takes time. Like it took me time to get there with Scott. And I will say our relationship is better than it ever has been. Also, I noticed how you said 3 years postpartum. I mean, that's where we are right now.
Yeah.
But I love that you called it 3 years postpartum. Because we think postpartum is like, 4 or 5 months. It's not. It takes a long time to even recover relationally from that experience of having a baby.
And I know we haven't touched on it, so I'll just kind of put a marker here for our next one day conversation. But the piece around intimacy as well is that so much of our connection, the way we feel emotionally, is also tied into how we feel sexually and how we want to connect with our partners. And that, I think, really is a conversation around identifying stressors, having permission, giving reassurance, redefining sexuality together as parents.
Yeah, if we have time, I would love to briefly talk about that because I do think that's a topic that comes up all the time, specifically in the moms that I work with, even my own mom friends. This is something we talk about. And for a lot of moms, and I think this can go both ways, there's this struggle to want to be intimate again after postpartum. And it's not everyone feels that way. But like sexually intimate, I think can feel very vulnerable. There's a lot of reasons why that can be hard. And I think a lot of parents struggle with their partner maybe is trying to initiate something and they just turn them down. And over time, being turned down so often, then the partner stops trying to initiate things. And I think it can be lost. So I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to that as well.
Yeah, the postpartum period is a delicate time in terms of how you are doing mentally, emotionally, how you are coping after giving birth, and the changes within yourself and your body. And sex is a vulnerable experience. And one of the worst things that I hear is when women go for their 6-week checkup and they're cleared. And what that has been translated into is you are cleared to have sex. And I encourage couples to remove the pressure to have sex, as in ending in orgasm. So oftentimes couples define intimacy as penis and vagina and ending in orgasms. So thinking heterosexual relationships. And the challenge with this is this narrow definition then means we're either having sex or we're not. And we're losing all of the gray in between. And that pressure, anytime you put pressure on the desire and arousal system, that experience of desire is going to flatline. You cannot go into intimacy and having sex with a backpack of bricks. So if you feel your partner sitting beside you and they only come to hug you because they want to have intercourse, that pressure is a brick in your backpack. You're not going to want to. And so during this time, I think what's really important for couples is it's not that we want to go back to the sex life we had before. Maybe you didn't even like it before, but now we want to redefine what that's going to look like, especially during that first year when you're more likely to be sleep deprived, or first 2 years, depending, or 3 years, depending on when your children sleep. And that's a whole other conversation. But, one of our kids is now just solidifying their sleep. And I wish someone had said to me, Tracy, just buckle up for 8 years. You'll get
It
there.
might be a while. I feel you on that.
It might be a while.
It's still rare for me to have all 3 kids sleeping through every single night. Like,
Right.
usually someone's up at some point.
Yes. And then, of course, the other piece is, what do we do with sex? Most people save it for the last thing on their to-do list. And at the end of the day, when you've tucked the kids into bed, you've picked up all the toys, you've done the dishes, you've prepared the lunches for the next day, you found the splash pants that were missing and because, rain is coming the next day, do you have any energy left for sex? And most people don't. And so it really does require people then to redefine what sex looks like. How do we also create physical intimacy that feels good, because we want pleasure and play in there as well? And then how do we actually get intentional about sex together?
2 points to that. I think something that's not often talked about is how your birth experience can impact your sexual desire. For those who had birth trauma or any trauma relating up to giving birth in pregnancy, I think that was something that I didn't expect, because my first pregnancy was very traumatic. I had preterm labor, and then I ended up having all these very traumatic checks, and they would always be checking to see if I was dilated. And after I couldn't figure out, the sexual desire was absolutely gone. And it wasn't until I could unpack the trauma that I had around the birth experience. And a lot of women I talked to have also felt that was missed, right?
Yeah.
They're like, why can't I get there? Well, sometimes you've been through trauma that can feel like an assault to your body.
Yes.
And then the second piece, this is just something I'm curious about. So I feel like I hear a lot about the different types of desire. So responsive desire versus spontaneous desire. Is there research to back that up? And if so, what does that look like for a couple?
Yeah, we have these 2 different pathways to desire. So yes, there's research, and I love and recommend Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski for any woman to have that, and also to read it with your partner. She also has a second book called Come Together. And there's a really great piece in there around how we enter into desire. So let's talk about those desire systems. There's 2 pathways to get to desire. And we can talk about it from how people experience desire, but we can also talk about it in terms of the seasons or stages of your relationship. So responsive desire is just that. It's responding to stimulation. It often starts in the body, and then your brain comes online. So I say to couples, lay together naked, no pressure, not to have sex, but just put bodies together, and then quiet your mind and see what happens inside your body. And it's going to respond to stimulation. Desire kicks in, desire then triggers arousal, and it maybe leads to a yes. Spontaneous desire is just that. It comes from out of nowhere. And it often happens in our brain first, and then that message goes to our body. What I've noticed about some moms is that during the day when they're, maybe having a quiet moment, they have spontaneous desire. It's 10 a.m., kids are having a nap, you're not doing anything, you've sat down, giving yourself a moment and a pause. It pops into your brain. Ah, isn't that interesting? Oh, I remember that moment where we just had the whatever that was. But then by the end of the night, you have the laundry basket on the bed. The kids have had epic meltdowns. Dinner dishes are still there. And now your body is just not tuned in because your brain is going through that high mental load. There's great research from Dr. Rosemary Basson. She's a psychiatrist in BC, and she talks about how the women's desire response cycle is different than men's. And part of what gets women to that yes is not necessarily just, hey, do you want to? Or it's Wednesday night, we should. It's more of a, how's our physical intimacy? How's our emotional intimacy? And how is the weight of the mental load? How are we managing all of that in our relationship so that we can feel connected to our partner, to then feel that sense of arousal, and then desire comes afterwards?
Yeah, I think it's so important to understand that. And I hope all partners can listen to that and then have empathy for their partner as well, understanding that maybe the way that they're aroused is different. And there's a way to support still having a sexual relationship, even if the way you get there is different than maybe it has even in the past.
It speaks to initiation as well. How are we starting this? And is the starting moment, so someone with more spontaneous desire might think it's okay to go over and grab your partner in some way. Whereas for them, that's maybe a buildup throughout the whole day to then putting your bodies together. Or how can I then get the laundry basket out of the room? How can I create a scene? How can I make sure we had good food that day so that our bodies are going to be more open to it? And I often encourage people, if you find yourself more in the responsive desire place, instead of saying no to intimacy, agree to put your bodies together, agree to quiet minds, agree to whatever that is for you. Is it your partner giving you a scalp massage? Is it them playing on your arm while you close your eyes? Is it the spooning and cuddling in bed? Whatever that looks like, just giving that a chance before then having to go into the it's a yes or a no tonight. And the other thing I remind moms as well is in heterosexual relationships, if your husband has an erection, it doesn't mean that you have to have sex. It means he's also experiencing pleasure. And how nice that is to know that you can both have that without necessarily having to have an orgasm to release that.
Yeah, I think that's really important and going to be helpful for parents as well. As we wrap up, I have a million more questions. I'm going to have you back on. But I think this is great. We really focused on that postpartum time, and it's such an important time. And I feel like on Robot Unicorn, we haven't been talking about that a lot lately. And I just know that people have this hunger to hear more and to feel seen in their postpartum experiences, especially in their relationships. As we wrap up, is there anything you wish that every couple would know as they enter into this season of their lives?
Don't put your relationship on the back burner. I think that is one of the biggest things I teach couples is I know that you are stretched. I know that you are tired and sleep deprived. I also know that connection is about intentionality and it's the small things frequently. And one of the biggest things you can do together is after those hard parenting moments to be able to flop on the couch and look over at each other and say, wow, we're in this together. I know we're not having those long vacations away. I know we're not going on date nights once a week. I know we're not having the sex that we want to. And I'm looking forward to us being there. And here's then what we can do together. And so thinking of those touch points throughout the day, that's how you build connection. That's how you strengthen your bond. It's the, I'll pour coffee for you in the morning. I'm going to turn and hug you before I open up my phone or get up for the day. It's the, when you come home after work, greeting your partner first. Those are all of these small moments that say to your partner, I see you, you matter to me, you're important to me. And that at our core is what we really need in our relationships.
That's so beautiful. And I love that idea of the small moments, the tiny moments and doing it together. So for each other. And I think sometimes we forget, and this is like, it reminds me of parenting too. Like a lot of the things I teach to parents is tiny moments with your kids too.
Yeah.
I think what we can forget and what I have forgotten over the years is that when I do something nice for Scott, it actually is reciprocal. Like it actually feels good for me too. And when you're feeling resentful, the last thing you really feel like doing is, let me make the coffee the way he likes it this morning. But when I do that, when I make the coffee the way he likes it, or when I even do something simple, like make his side of the bed the way he likes to have it made, not just quickly the way I like to, quickly make the bed in the morning, it actually matters to me too. And I end up feeling that reciprocal joy and closeness because I'm doing that thing for my partner. And when that can go both ways, it's so small, but that can really build your relationship over time.
And when we feel secure and like we're in this together, everything else, it's not easier, but you feel more resilient to everything else. So when you're having a hard season with parenting, I think of when our kids turned 7 and the anger that showed up that I wasn't ready for, or the assertion into their autonomy at 4 and all the other things. When we feel solid and connected, we can weather the storm in a much easier and better way.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Tracy. It was so great to have you. Can you let listeners know where they can find you?
Absolutely. One of my favorite things about podcast conversations is when you come over and tell me what stood out for you today. What are you going to try or have a conversation with your partner about, or the piece of wisdom that maybe you want to share with them? Let me know what that is. Send me a DM over on Instagram. My handle's at Dr. Tracy D. And then all of my resources are available on my website, drtracyd.com.
Fantastic. And of course, we'll link you in the show notes so people can just click on you and go straight over to your Instagram page. Please follow Dr. Tracy. I mean, I've mentioned a few times how your content has helped me so much. And even I'll message you asking you questions about couples therapy. And it's just been such a great support over the years for me as well. So thank you so much. And thank you for this conversation. I really hope it's helpful for the listeners today.
Thank you for having me here, Jess.
Hey friends, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. We are glad that you are here. If you enjoyed today's episode and found it interesting, we'd really appreciate it if you'd leave a rating and a review. Scott and I actually sit down together and read them all. A 5-star rating helps us share our podcast and get these important messages out there. Thank you so much for listening, and we can't wait to talk to you again next time.